I recall the heaviness of those chains, unseen yet more burdensome than any tangible load I'd ever borne. They weren't crafted from metal, but molded from recollections, shaped by remorse, and secured firmly with the conviction that my past self dictated my future potential. I believed I was lugging my history along, but the reality was far more crushing. My history was hauling me, pulling me back even as I attempted to advance. You're familiar with that sensation, aren't you? That stifling feeling when your past stretches through time to clutch your ankle, just as you're poised to leap into something grander. For years, I convinced myself I was learning from my trials, growing tougher, becoming more astute. But in the quiet of night, when there was no escape from my own thoughts, I could sense them, the murmurs of every misstep, every dismissal, every instance when I didn't meet my own expectations. They were no longer mere memories. They had morphed into my essence, my constraints, my justifications for not aiming higher or dreaming larger. I had become an inmate in a cell constructed from my own yesterdays. Then an event occurred that altered everything. I realized that what I perceived as my frailty, my deepest source of disgrace and constraint, could evolve into my most formidable asset, not by battling my past, not by attempting to erase or reject it, but by learning to reshape it into something entirely novel. What I'm about to impart isn't merely about releasing the past. It's about something far more potent. It's about converting every injury into insight, every obstacle into fortitude, every painful moment into a wellspring of indomitable strength. Listen intently, for this isn't another tale of surmounting hurdles. It's about uncovering that your challenges, particularly those residing in your memory, aren't impediments to your magnificence. They they are the very bedrock upon which your greatness will be erected. But I caution you, once you grasp this truth, once you truly perceive it, you can never revert to being a captive of your own history. Are you prepared to learn how your past can morph into your most enlightening mentor rather than your harshest captor? Upon my initial arrival in America, I bore more than just my possessions. I carried the burden of every skepticism ever cast upon my capabilities, every opportunity denied, every moment when my uniqueness made me feel inferior. I remember traversing the avenues of San Francisco, sensing the gazes, hearing the hushed remarks, and something within me began to solidify, not with vigor, but with acrimony, not with resolve, but with defensive air. The past possesses a peculiar ability to metamorphose. What initiates as a memory gradually evolves into a conviction, and what commences as a conviction ultimately becomes a confinement. I found myself perpetually glancing over my shoulder, not at genuine dangers, but at the phantoms of bygone rebuffs. Every fresh prospect was filtered through the lens of past letdowns. Every bond was approached with the wariness of someone who had been wounded before. I believed I was being prudent, gaining insight from experience, safeguarding myself. But sagacity and self-preservation, I uncovered, are not synonymous. You sense it too, don't you? That gravity when you endeavor to embark on something novel, something that necessitates vulnerability once more. You see, once more. Your past extends forward like an unseen force, positioning itself between you and your potential. It murmurs tales of your constraints so persuasively that you commence believing they are truths rather than antiquated narratives. The employment you didn't secure, becomes evidence of your inadequacy. The bond that dissolved becomes proof of your unworthiness, of affection. The enterprise that collapsed becomes affirmation that you're not destined for triumph. But here's what I unearthed in my practice space during those hours when it was solely me and the wooden figure, solely me and my relentless quest for something grander. The past doesn't genuinely exist. I'm aware that sounds implausible, perhaps even ludicrous, but bear with me. The past subsists solely as electrical impulses in your mind, as narratives you recount to yourself, as sentiments you've attached to occurrences that are no longer transpiring. The influence you've bestowed upon your past, that's tangible. The insights accessible in your past, those are tangible as well. But the past as a living, breathing entity that can govern your present, that's a mirage. A highly persuasive one, but a mirage nonetheless. This epiphany struck me like a corporeal impact during one specific practice session. I was honing my techniques, and abruptly I realized I was moving not with my innate cadence, but with the cautious, protective motions of someone who had been censured too frequently. I was combating not the adversary before me, but the specters of every mentor who had asserted I wasn't adequate. Every expert who had questioned my approaches, every individual who had observed me and seen solely what I lacked, rather than what I possessed. In that instant, I comprehended something profound. I wasn't merely bearing my past, I was enacting it. Every day, in countless minor ways, I was reenacting antiquated tales of constraint and defeat. My past wasn't merely influencing my present, it was orchestrating it like an invisible Mariantis. And the most astonishing aspect was this. I was the one granting it authorization to do so. Permit me to elucidate the three most perilous methods your past can incarcerate you, because acknowledging these patterns is the initial phase toward emancipation. The first is the narrative snare. Your intellect is a masterful narrator, incessantly fabricating tales about your identity based on your experiences. But tales, even veracious ones, are not equivalent to actuality. They are interpretations, and interpretations can be altered. The second is the emotional dungeon. Unaddressed sentiments from your past don't merely dissipate, they accumulate like sediment in a stream, eventually obstructing the natural course of your vitality. And perhaps most insidious is the identity enclosure. You commence defining yourself by your injuries rather than your potential, by your failures rather than your possibilities. I expended months in that initial training phase in America, ensnared by all three. My narrative was that I was an outsider, perpetually gazing into a realm that would never fully embrace me. My emotional dungeon was constructed from accumulated rejections and the fatigue of incessantly having to validate myself. My identity had become so intertwined with being the underdog, the one who had to contend for every chance, that I couldn't envision who I would be sans that struggle. But then arrived the evening that altered everything. I was solitary in the practice hall, laboring late as usual, when I glimpsed myself in the mirror. But instead of perceiving the warrior I aspired to become, I beheld someone entirely distinct. I saw a youth whose motions were constrained by invisible fetters, whose vigor was dimmed by the weight of antiquated tales, whose potential was stifled by the necessity to incessantly demonstrate that he was more than his past insinuated. That's when I realized the most pivotal truth of my entire odyssey. The past doesn't define you, but your rapport with the past absolutely does. You can bear your history as a encumbrance or as sustenance. You can permit your experiences to become constraints or let them become launch pads. Let them become launch pads. The selection I uncovered is invariably yours. Always. But making that selection necessitates something most individuals are unwilling to do. It necessitates you to cease being devoted to your constraints. This leads me to what I term the alchemy of metamorphosis, the process by which base metals of agonizing experiences can be transmuted into the gold of sagacity and vigor. But this isn't about optimistic thinking or merely opting to perceive the positive in negative circumstances. This is about something far more profound and pragmatic. It's about learning to extract potency from powerlessness to discover fortitude in the very places where you felt most feeble. The initial tenet of this alchemy is radical acceptance. Not acceptance as surrender, but acceptance as a form of mental combat. When you cease resisting what has already transpired, you liberate immense quantities of energy that can be redirected toward what you aspire to create. But I expended so much vigor opposing my past, yearning for it to have been dissimilar, envisioning how much simpler my existence would be if only certain events hadn't occurred. But resistance to what is already complete is akin to attempting to strike liquid. It accomplishes nothing except exhausting you. The second tenet is purposeful extraction. Every experience, no matter how agonizing, contains invaluable intelligence. But most individuals are so occupied by being wounded by their experiences that they never pause to inquire what those experiences might be endeavoring to impart. The rejection imparted resilience saves. The criticism imparted trust in my own judgment. The instances of feeling like an outsider imparted the value of authenticity over acceptance. But I only assimilated these lessons when I ceased perceiving myself as a casualty of my circumstances and commenced perceiving myself as a scholar of my own life. The third tenet is conscious reconstruction. Once you've accepted what transpired and extracted the sagacity available in those experiences, you can initiate the process of deliberately reconstructing your narrative. Not by deceiving yourself or pretending negative occurrences were actually positive, but by opting to concentrate on who you became due to what you endured, rather than on what you forfeited or how you were harmed. This reconstruction process altered everything for me. Instead of perceiving my initial struggles in America as proof that I didn't belong, I commenced perceiving them as preparation for the unique contribution I was destined to make. Instead of viewing the rejection of my methods as confirmation that I was erroneous, I commenced comprehending it as validation that I was offering something genuinely innovative. Instead of bearing the weight of being different as an encumbrance, I commenced experiencing it as a gift. But allow me to be explicit about something crucial. This transformation isn't about pretending that painful occurrences didn't inflict harm or that arduous experiences were somehow covertly beneficial. Pain is genuine. Loss is genuine. Loss is genuine. Trauma is genuine. What I'm discussing is learning to separate what transpired to you from what you decided signifies about you. What I'm discussing is cultivating the ability to extract sagacity from your wounds without being defined by them. I recall the precise instant when this tenet became tangible for me instead of merely theoretical. I was preparing for what would become one of my initial significant cinematic roles, and I found myself paralyzed by an antiquated fear. What if I wasn't adequate? What if my accent was too pronounced? What if American audiences couldn't connect with someone like me? These weren't novel fears. They were the same antiquated phantoms that had haunted me since I first arrived in this nation. I sat with them. I listened to what they were genuinely attempting to convey, and what I uncovered astonished me. Beneath the fear of inadequacy was actually a profound dedication to excellence. Beneath the concern about my accent was a fervent desire to convey something meaningful. Beneath the anxiety about acceptance was a profound love for the art of storytelling. In that instant, I realized that my fears weren't my adversaries. They were messengers bearing crucial information about what mattered most to me. My past rejections weren't proof of my constraints. They were highlighting the very qualities that would eventually become my most formidable strengths. The aspects that made me distinct, the aspects that had inflicted pain, these were the same aspects that would enable me to offer something unique to the world. This is what I mean by transforming your past from a confinement into an instructor. It's not about forgetting what transpired or pretending it was inconsequential. It's about learning to interpret your experiences differently, to extract diverse meanings, to discover diverse possibilities concealed within the same events. Your past doesn't alter, but your rapport with your past can be entirely revolutionized. Now, permit me to share with you the specific practices that enabled me to make this transformation tangible in my daily existence. These aren't theoretical notions. They are pragmatic instruments that you can commence utilizing immediately to shift your rapport with your own history. But remember, like any martial art, these practices necessitate consistent application to become efficacious. You cannot read about them and anticipate transformation. You must live them. The initial practice is what I term the daily inventory. Each morning, before you engage with the world, spend 10 minutes reviewing not what you need to accomplish that day, but who you need to be. Ask yourself this question: what antiquated narrative from my past might attempt to direct my actions today, and who do I opt to be instead? This isn't about denying your history. It's about consciously selecting which aspects of your history will influence your present moment choices. The second practice is the wisdom extraction exercise. Once each week, identify one arduous experience from your past and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what strength did I cultivate due to this experience that I might not have cultivated otherwise? Second, what insight did this experience provide about life, about people, or about myself? Third, how might this experience enable me to assist someone else who confronts similar challenges? This practice transmutes your pain into purpose and your wounds into wisdom. The third practice is narrative reconstruction. Choose one story about yourself that you've been recounting for years. A story that portrays you as limited, damaged, or disadvantaged in some manner. Now, consciously craft a new version of this same story, using the same facts, but focusing on your growth, your resilience, and your strength. Practice recounting this new version to yourself until it feels more authentic than the old one. This isn't about deceiving yourself. It's about choosing which truth you want to emphasize. The fourth practice is what I term the resentment release. Identify the person, situation, or circumstance from your past that you've been carrying the most anger or resentment toward. Now, for 1 week, spend 5 minutes each day sending that person or situation genuine gratitude for the way it contributed to your strength, your wisdom, or your character. This practice doesn't necessitate you to approve of what transpired, only to acknowledge how it contributed to who you've become. But perhaps the most potent practice of all is what I term the future past meditation. Sit quietly and imagine yourself 10 years from now, looking back on your current life. From that future perspective, what would you want your current challenges to teach you? What growth would you want them to inspire? What strength would you want them to develop? Then live today as if you are already that future version of yourself, already possessing that wisdom and strength. These practices are efficacious because they engage your mind in a fundamentally distinct rapport with time and experience. Instead of being dragged backward by your past, you learn to extract what's valuable from it and leave the rest behind. Instead of being defined by what transpired to you, you become defined by how you opt to respond to what transpired to you. I want to tell you about a moment when all of this coalesced for me in a manner that made it impossible to doubt the potency of these principles. I was filming Enter the Dragon, and there was a scene that necessitated me to convey a particular kind of intensity that I was struggling to access. The director was growing frustrated, the crew was waiting, and I felt that familiar pressure of needing to prove myself that had haunted me since childhood. But instead of combating that pressure, or attempting to repel it, I did something distinct. I welcomed it. I recognized it as an old friend, a familiar energy that had been with me through every significant challenge of my life. And in welcoming it, I realized something profound. This pressure, this need to prove myself, it wasn't my adversary. It was fuel. It was the very thing that had driven me to excellence time and time again. In that instant, I ceased attempting to overcome my past and commenced channeling it. Every rejection I had ever faced became fuel for the intensity of that performance. Every moment of feeling like an outsider became power that I could draw upon to portray someone fighting for their place in the world. Every instance of being underestimated became ammunition for showing what was possible when someone refused to accept other people's limitations. The performance that resulted from this shift was unlike anything I had ever achieved before. Not because I had somehow erased my past or transcended my insecurities, but because I had learned to utilize them. I had transformed them from anchors that held me down into engines that propelled me forward. This is the ultimate lesson I want to share with you here about transforming your rapport with your past. Your history doesn't need to be overcome. It needs to be integrated. Your painful experiences don't need to be forgotten. They need to be alchemized. Your struggles don't need to be denied. They need to be channeled. The very things that have caused you the most pain often contain the seeds of your greatest power. For this transformation necessitates courage. necessitates courage. It necessitates the willingness to look at your most difficult experiences not as evidence of your limitations, but as raw material for your greatness. It necessitates you to cease seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances and commence seeing yourself as a sculptor of your own character. It necessitates you to understand that your past is not something that happened to you, it's something that happened for you. This doesn't imply that every difficult experience was somehow meant to be, or that everything happens for a reason in some cosmic sense. What it implies is that, regardless of why something transpired, you have the power to decide what it will signify in the context of your life. You have the authority to determine whether your experiences will become limitations or launching pads, whether your pain will become poison or medicine, whether your past will be a prison or a teacher. I spent the initial part of my life attempting to escape my past, the second part combating against it, and the third part learning from it. But it was only when I commenced consciously partnering with my past that I discovered my true power. Your past isn't your adversary. It's your curriculum. It's your curriculum. The experiences that shaped you aren't obstacles to your greatness. They are the very foundation upon which your greatness will be built. Now comes the moment of truth. Everything I've shared with you up to this point has been preparation for what I'm about to challenge you to do. Because knowing these principles intellectually and living them practically are two entirely different things. Oh, transformation doesn't transpire in your mind. It transpires in your choices, in your daily actions, in your willingness to show up differently in the world. For the next 30 days, I want you to engage in what I call the Liberation Protocol. This isn't a gentle self-improvement program. It's a systematic dismantling of the prison your past has built around your potential. Each day for 30 days, you will engage in one specific action designed to demonstrate to yourself that you are no longer controlled by your history. Week 1 is about recognition. Each day, identify one way that your past is currently limiting your present. Maybe it's a conversation you're avoiding because of old rejection. Maybe it's an opportunity you're not pursuing because of previous failure. Maybe it's a relationship you're sabotaging because of ancient wounds. Don't try to fix anything yet. Just recognize the patterns. Week 2 is about separation. Now that you can see how your past is influencing your present, begin the practice of conscious choice. Each day, in at least one situation, choose to act based on your current potential rather than your historical limitations. If your past says you're not qualified, apply anyway. If your past says you're not worthy, ask anyway. If your past says you can't, try anyway. Week 3 is about integration. This is where the real transformation happens. Begin to consciously use your difficult experiences as sources of strength rather than reasons for limitation. If you've experienced rejection, let it fuel your determination. If you've faced criticism, let it sharpen your... If you've encountered failure, let it deepen your resilience. Your pain becomes power. Your wounds become wisdom. Week 4 is about embodiment. Now you begin living as someone whose past serves them rather than enslaves. You make decisions from strength rather than fear, from possibility rather than limitation, from who you're becoming rather than who you've been. You carry your history lightly, extract its lessons constantly, and refuse to be defined by anything other than your conscious choices. But here's what I need you to understand about this protocol. It's not designed to eliminate your past or help you forget difficult experiences. Hmm. It's designed to transform your relationship with those experiences so completely that they become allies in your growth rather than obstacles to your greatness. You're not trying to become someone who has never struggled. You're becoming someone who has learned to transform struggle into strength. The real breakthrough comes when you realize that your most painful experiences often contain your most powerful gifts, the things you've tried hardest to hide or heal or forget. It hangs that equip you to make your unique contribution to the world. Hmm. Your sensitivity, born from being hurt, becomes your superpower for understanding others. Your resilience, forged in difficulty, becomes your ability to persevere when others give up. Your authenticity, earned through struggle, becomes your capacity to connect with people in ways that surface level success never could. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine looking back on your life from the perspective of your deathbed. From that vantage point, what would you want your struggles to have taught you? What would you want your pain to have produced in terms of character, wisdom, and strength? What would you want your difficult experiences to have enabled you to offer to the world? Now, what if you could live with that perspective starting today? This is the ultimate invitation I'm extending to you. Not to overcome your past, but to partner with it. Not to transcend your struggles, but to transform them. Not to become someone who has never faced difficulty, but to become someone who has learned to alchemize difficulty into power. Your past is not your prison unless you choose to see it that way. Your history is not your destiny unless you decide to live it that way. Your experiences are not your limitations unless you allow them to become that. Remember this above all else. The past is a lesson, not a prison. Every moment of pain contained wisdom you needed to acquire. Every experience of loss taught you about what truly matters. Every instance of rejection redirected you towards something more aligned with your true nature. Every failure revealed something important about your character or your path. You are not the victim of your experiences. You are the beneficiary of them, but only when you choose to see them that way. Water doesn't fight the rocks in its path. It learns from them, flows around them, and eventually transforms them. Be like water with your past. Don't resist it. Flow with it. Don't let it stop you. Let it shape you into something more powerful than you could have become without it. Your past is not your problem. It's your curriculum. And you are both student and teacher in the school of your own becoming. The choice is yours, as it has always been. You can continue to carry your history as a burden, or you can begin to wield it as a weapon. You can remain imprisoned by what happened to you, or you can be liberated by what you learned from what happened to you. You can let your past define your future, or you can let your future redefine your past. The power has always been in your hands. Today is the day you choose to use it.